Wild Soul HOPECast, Episode 8, Belonging Without Self-Abandonment, sponsored by Wild Soul Hope and the Hope Method. Hi, Lovey. Welcome back to Wild Soul HOPECast. Sharon Lea here, creator of Wild Soul Hope, the Hope Method, and author of When the Soul Remembers Hope. I turn chaos into clarity using hope and unconditional love, moving you from survival to sovereignty while we uncover the lie about hope. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly started calculating who you needed to be in order to belong there? Because somewhere along the way, we learned that belonging meant adjusting. And today's episode is about belonging without shrinking and without abandoning yourself. It's about not losing yourself in the presence of others. Honestly, you don't have to agree with anything I bring up. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Wisdom works best when it's invited, not forced. Some conversations are meant to be listened to slowly. If your body asks for a break, take a moment and honor that. You can pause, breathe, and return when you're ready. Nothing here requires endurance. Before we go anywhere today, let's take an intentional breath together. If you're driving, soften your shoulders. If you're folding laundry, let your jaw unclench. If you're hiding in the bathroom for 2 minutes of peace, I see you. Yes, I see you. With intention and not performance, not entitled, not enlightened, not aesthetic, just real. Inhale for 4 counts. Inhale in. 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That helps reset that vagus nerve and helps take you out of that never-ending fight or flight mode. Use that breath anytime you need it. Belonging is one of the deepest human needs we have as humans. It is a way to quench that ever-empty feeling of loneliness. And for many of us, it has also been one of the most confusing feelings. Because somewhere along the way, we learned something subtle but powerful. We learned that belonging meant adjusting ourselves, shrinking, soothing, explaining, apologizing, and even performing. So today, we're talking about something radical. Belonging. Yes, belonging without leaving yourself behind. And by the end of this episode, I want you to understand something deeply. Belonging is not something you earn. It's something you remember. And why sometimes belonging can really hurt. Most of us don't actually want attention of any kind. We want safety. We want to walk into a room and not feel like we have to calculate who we need to be. But when belonging has come with conditions, be less emotional. Don't talk so much. Be agreeable. Don't laugh so much. Don't talk so loud. Don't rock the boat. Don't outshine. Don't be quote unquote too much. And through those shaming expressions of our loving relationships, we've adapted. We became socially intelligent, hyper-aware, empathic, attuned. Some of us learned to read micro-expressions before we ever learned to read a single book. And that skill kept us safe. But here's the quiet cost of that survival skill. If belonging requires constant self-editing, then it isn't belonging. It's performance to please. And that performance is exhausting. Have you ever wondered if the parts of yourself that felt quote unquote too much as a child were the very parts you later learned to hide in order to belong? They became the next to belonging that many people carry quietly. The feeling of being the one who was chosen last. Maybe it happened on the playground when teams were picked and everyone else's name was called first. Maybe it happened in your own family, where you were the one who was labeled the sensitive one, the difficult one, the weird one, the black sheep. Maybe you were the kid who asked too many questions, or the kid who felt everything so deeply, or the kid who noticed things that other people pretended not to see. And when that happens early enough in life, something subtle forms inside us, a quiet question: what's wrong with me? Not because something was wrong with you by any means, but because belonging felt conditional. So many children make a decision in that moment. If I change enough, maybe I'll be chosen next time. So we try to become lesser or easier, less emotional, less visible, less intense, less ourselves. But here's the real truth many of us discover later in life. The black sheep of the family or the classroom is often the one who refused, even unconsciously, to betray their deeper nature. They saw things differently. They felt things deeper. They questioned things others accepted. And that difference can make a child feel like an outsider. But in adulthood, that same difference often becomes their wisdom. So if you've ever felt like one who didn't quite fit, the one who felt too aware, too sensitive, too curious, too strange, you weren't broken. You were simply early. And sometimes the ones who feel like outsiders in childhood become the ones who build new tables in adulthood. So we learn to adapt. We became the helper, the strong one, the peacemaker. You know what I'm talking about. How did we learn so easily to disappear? And this is getting kind of heavy, but hang in there with me and let's go a layer deeper here, okay? Because maybe many of us learned early in life that being fully ourselves came with risks. So we became roles instead. You know the roles: the helper, the fixer, the strong one, the overachiever, the quiet peacemaker, the spiritual one, the mother, or even the glue, the one who holds everything and everyone together. Because belonging became transactional for us. Telling ourselves, if I provide value, I get to stay and belong. And I know this pattern well. There were years of my life where I believed my sole purpose and job was to keep everyone emotionally comfortable. I am told I cried quite a bit as a child. Nonstop, my aunt tells me. And I have distinct memories of having taunting, sometimes angry, yelling faces close to mine, holding spoons to catch my tears, like they were some kind of poison or embarrassment. Well, eventually, I stopped shedding tears altogether. And to this day, I still don't shed tears that often. And mostly, I only shed them in the quiet dark where no one can see. Because my pain and my sorrow are the only things I have that is mine and solely mine alone. And no one gets to see it unless I value or honor you enough with it. Because if someone was upset, I fixed it. If conflict started, I soothed it over. If something hurt me, I minimized it. From the outside, that looked like strength. But inside, it was self-abandonment. A quiet self-abandonment. The kind that happens when you become so skilled at caring for everyone else that you forget how to stay present for yourself. And then the realization that changed everything for me was this: the only person I had consistently been leaving behind and abandoning was me. And that realization was excruciatingly painful. But this quiet realization of my own self-abandonment tendencies also became my doorway to my own sovereignty. So let me ask you, if you were like me and you've spent years learning to disappear in order to belong, what do you think your body has learned to do to keep you safe? There's a powerful line in The Body Keeps the Score by trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk that says, being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. And that line explains something important about belonging. Our bodies are not just reacting to the present moment. Sometimes they are reacting to everything we learned about safety and connection long, long ago. We know this because we've already explored this idea in previous episodes. Specifically, how fragmentation is not just an event that happened sometime in our past. It is also the imprint left by that experience in the mind, brain, and body. We've explored many times how the body keeps impeccable records. Your ego, for instance, remembers every environment where you felt safe and every single environment where you felt like you had to shrink to survive. So here's a question worth asking yourself. What does your body feel like when you're trying to belong somewhere that doesn't actually feel safe? Because false belonging has a very specific feeling in the body. Often it feels like bracing before you speak, replaying those conversations afterward. Sometimes a tight chest, avoidance of situations and people, scanning the room for any threats, feeling exhausted after social interactions. Your nervous system knows when it is performing. You might physically feel your ego pulling on you, posturing with you, or your body's adrenaline response is kicking into gear. But true belonging feels very different. You will feel grounded, warm. You'll exhibit relaxed eye contact, laughter that doesn't feel forced, silence that doesn't feel dangerous. This is why the HOPE method matters here. HOPE teaches us to listen to our internal signals, harness our awareness, choose what is optimal for our nervous system, practice positivity rooted in the truth, and protect and direct our energy. Belonging without self-abandonment is actually an energetic recalibration. And here's something fascinating about recalibration. Your body is not fixed. When somebody says they're not who they used to be, well, you dang right I'm not. Scientifically, I'm not. And neither are you. Because science tells us that many of the cells in our bodies regenerate over time. Our skin renews, our blood cells replace themselves, bones slowly rebuild. Over the course of several years, much of the physical structure of our physical body changes in a very real way. We're consistently becoming new versions of ourselves every single day. So no, you aren't who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You are a completely different human being on a cellular level. And this reminds me of an ancient philosophical question known as the ship of Theseus. The story asks, if a ship has every single plank replaced over time, is it still the same ship? And in many ways, our lives are similar. We carry memories of who we once were. The child who felt different, the teenager who felt misunderstood, the adult who learned to shrink in order to belong. But the truth is, we are constantly evolving, which means The version of you who learned to disappear does not have to be the version of you who continues living that way. Healing is not about erasing the past. It's about consciously shaping who you are becoming. Which means the story your body learned about belonging is not the final story your life has to tell. So now that we can recognize the signal, what on earth do we do with it? When you start noticing these signals in your body, when you begin realizing where you've been abandoning yourself, a very natural question arises. How do we return to ourselves after years of learning to leave? This is where the deeper work begins. Your nervous system learns safety all over again. Your body learns presence all over again. And your heart learns openness all over again. Many spiritual traditions describe transformation in groups of three. And this is seen throughout history in political, religious, and spiritual settings. But one that came to mind for me, and many of you may recognize the pattern, is the Holy Trinity. You know the one: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. For me, the Trinity of healing looks less like a religious rulebook and more like a symbolic way of understanding how transformation happens. In the work I teach through the Hope Method, that same pattern appears as three movements of healing: acceptance, forgiveness, and unconditional love. You need all three in order to unblock stuck past and present energy. This trinity that restores belonging is expressed through acceptance, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Not as a religious doctrine, but as an energetic principle. And I'll take some time to explain each concept. So we'll start with acceptance. Acceptance is not blind agreement. No. Acceptance is reality acknowledgement. It is the moment we stop arguing with what has already happened. You may know this as the psychological loop of replaying arguments and conversations in your mind, the quote unquote, I wish I would haves. Thoughts that make you believe that if only you could go back and change something, everything would be fixed or changed in a better outcome. But real acceptance says something very different. It says, this is who I am. This is what shaped me. This is where I am right now. What happened already happened. What is done is already done. I can no longer punish myself for the sideways moments in my life. Acceptance is incredibly stabilizing because when you stop fighting yourself and stop fighting your own ego, you stop needing external approval to soothe that internal war that's created. Acceptance says, I no longer need to pretend I'm someone else to deserve connection. Forgiveness. Let's talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Forgiveness does not mean tolerating harm. Forgiveness means releasing the internal contract that says, if I had been different, I would have been loved better. Forgiveness is not just about forgiving someone else. It is also about forgiving yourself. This was a hard one for me. Forgiving yourself for being too small to react. Forgiving yourself for not having the words in the moment at that time. Forgiving yourself for staying in situations that caused harm, trauma, fragmentation, or conflict. Forgiving, and this one's important, forgiving the younger versions of yourself who were simply just trying to survive. Because many of us look back at our past with the wisdom we have today and think, I should have known better. Why didn't I see it? But the truth is, you were operating with the awareness and resources you had at that time. Forgiveness releases the pressure of hindsight. It heals the heart. It softens the gut. It quiets the mind. It releases the ego from constant defense. Forgiveness allows you to stop punishing yourself for the ways you survived. And that is incredibly powerful. Now let's come to the next topic that I tend to talk a lot about because I understand it well. Unconditional love. This is where expansion comes in. Using unconditional love. This is where the heart begins to radiate outward again. Not desperate love, not approval-seeking love, but sovereign love. The kind of love that says, I can love you and still choose myself. Unconditional love is not vanity. It is nurturing, empathic, kind. Many of us place conditions on loving ourselves. We say things like, if I lose 10 more pounds, then I'll feel comfortable in my body. If I make more money, then I'll finally feel successful. If I fix this one thing about myself, then I'll deserve love. But unconditional love says something very different. It says I'm allowed to grow. I'm allowed to evolve. And I am still worthy of care and belonging right this minute, right now. Unconditional love does not erase boundaries. No, it strengthens them because love that requires you to disappear is not love. It's negotiation, pure and simple. Acceptance stabilizes you. Forgiveness frees you. Unconditional love expands you. That is the trinity of belonging. And in many ways, this work is ego work. Not destroying the ego, not suppressing it, but working with it. When we talk about acceptance softens the ego, not suppressing it, but working with it. Because acceptance softens the ego's resistance. Forgiveness releases the ego's guilt and shame. And unconditional love teaches the ego that it no longer has to fight so hard to prove its worth. And when that happens, we stop performing belonging and we begin living it. We begin living belonging. This inner work is what allows the hope framework to actually function. And I'm going to repeat because acceptance stabilizes you, forgiveness frees you, and unconditional love expands you. That is the true trinity of belonging. And when belonging begins within you, something starts to shift. You stop asking the world to validate your worth, and you start paying attention to what your own energy is telling you. The environments you tolerate, they begin to change. The conversations you participate in begin to change. The way you move through this world begins to change because the Trinity restores belonging within your core self. And the Hope Method teaches you how to live from that place. So, now let's bring it all back to hope. Harness. Notice where you're abandoning yourself. Optimal. Choose environments that align with your nervous system. Positive. Not forced positivity, but clarity-rooted perspective. Energy. Protect it and invest it wisely. Belonging is not about universal approval. No, it's about energetic congruence. You're not meant to belong everywhere. You are meant to resonate somewhere. And that is a very different thing. And when you begin living through the hope lens, something interesting starts to happen. You begin noticing where your energy feels aligned and where it doesn't. You begin recognizing the rooms where your nervous system can breathe freely and the rooms where you've been quietly shrinking. And slowly, something inside you starts to change. You stop trying so hard to hide, because when you belong to yourself, the next step is allowing yourself to be seen. And that's where many people feel the next wave of fear. We're going to step into visibility without self-abandonment, because at some point in healing, something shifts. You stop wanting to hide. You feel called to share your voice. You show your ideas. You live more honestly. And that moment can feel both exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Because visibility once meant vulnerability without safety. But healing teaches us something brand new. You're allowed to be seen selectively. Discernment is not isolation. Boundaries are not rejection. You don't owe access to everyone. You owe alignment to yourself. Belonging begins internally, but eventually it asks you to live out loud. Did you catch that? Belonging begins internally, within you, but eventually it asks you to live out loud. To honor that living out loud moment, let's bring it into the body by placing your hand over your heart and take a slow breath in through the nose and out the mouth. Then ask yourself quietly, where have I been leaving myself? No judgment. No judgment. Just notice. Now ask yourself another question. What would it feel like to stay? Because belonging happens internally. When you belong to yourself, reflection becomes redirection and pivot. Silence becomes space. Approval becomes optional. Now that we've done the work, let's take some time and sit with it. When approval becomes optional, sometimes something very quiet begins to happen inside us. Our nervous system softens, our breath slows, and the constant pressure to prove ourselves begins to loosen its grip. We begin practicing something very different: acceptance, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Not as ideas, but as a way of living intentionally. And when we slow down long enough to live from that place, that specific place of acceptance, forgiveness, and unconditional love, something very powerful opens up. I call it curiosity. The kind of curiosity that allows us to look at our lives with compassion instead of judgment. So before we close today, I want to invite you into a moment of reflection. You might want to journal these questions or simply let them sit with you throughout the week, like something slowly simmering in the background of your awareness. Here are a few of the questions that you might ask yourself. Where did I learn belonging requires performance? What part of me is tired of shape-shifting? Who feels regulating in my life? What environments cause my body to soften? What would acceptance of myself change for me today? And maybe the deepest question of all, what if I already belong? And I've just been forgetting. Please know these questions aren't meant to overwhelm you. They're simply invitations. Invitations to notice where you've been leaving yourself behind and where you're ready to return. Because when you begin belonging to yourself, something interesting starts to happen. Your light naturally becomes more visible. And that brings us to something we'll explore in our next episode, where in episode 9, we're going to talk about sharing your light without burning out. Because once you stop abandoning yourself to belonging, the next question becomes, how do you show up in the world without exhausting your energy? How do you give, contribute, create, and love others without losing yourself again and again in the process? Well, I'll tell you, it's through living intentionally, for one. Because belonging without abandonment is not loud. It is quiet sovereignty. It is sitting at a table and knowing, I do not need to shrink or expand unnaturally here. And if you can't find that table, build one. Until then, you were never meant to disappear to belong. You were meant to be received. Hope isn't about fitting in. It's about coming home when we remember. Sometimes all we have left is hope, and sometimes hope is enough. Talk soon.